Hi, Chelsea. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, I am so excited to talk with you today. But before we get into all the great things that we're going to talk about, I'd love for you just to share your personal journey because I know you and I were talking about how that sort of actually led into some of the things we're going to discuss today. And I know it's so impactful that we all have these stories that sort of brought us to where we are.
Yes, like so many of us that come to this holistic health space, it really starts with our own issues, our own health issues that we're not finding any answers for. And that was certainly true for me. I grew up with a lot of digestive issues, which, frankly, I just thought were normal because my mom had them. I'm like, oh, that's just normal. That's what we have. Um, But I also had a genetic skin condition that I saw doctors for 20 years, trying all kinds of things. I did every cream, every pill. I did major surgery. I did minor surgery. Finally, we hit a wall and they were like, there's really nothing more we can do for you. We've tried everything. It's just kind of have to live with it. And I was like, okay, what else can I do? I mean, I just kind of thought, well, this is my cross to bear. Everybody has their health issues. This is just mine. I have to live with it. So kind of moving on, along the way, but it really wasn't until I was ready to start a family and I was diagnosed with unexplained infertility, which I will say in air quotes because that means they
Mhm.
don't know what's wrong with you.
Yes.
And so, the doctors were recommending moving on, the fertility treatment path. And my husband was not on board with that. He was not having it. He was like, they can't even tell you what's wrong with you. I don't think there's anything wrong with you. I think these things take time, but we've been trying for a year. That was really frustrating to me, honestly, and it was a hard time because I was like, "Yes, I will do anything to have a baby.
Mhm.
Let's just." He was like, "No, I'm not for that." So it was out of that desperation that I started researching. Like, is there anything I can do to try to help myself? And so, a couple of things. I found a book called "Taking Charge of Your Fertility," which really kind of retaught me about my body because a lot of us don't really think of. We learn about it in like fourth grade.
Mhm.
About our
Yes.
cycle and stuff, and then you never interact again with it or think about it. So I got that, and I went to a naturopath, a doctor. He changed my diet. He gave me some supplements,
This is
and
this is the call. I'm so sorry. You said
okay,
supplements last.
no,
I'm
that's
so
okay.
sorry. I'll be right back.
No, it's okay. Okay, yeah, yeah.
Chelsea, I am so sorry. I apologize. That was so rude of me, but
No, it's totally
she would
fine.
not like, she would not stop talking. I'm like, okay, you give me the thing, you give me the thing. I wrote it down. Like, she just like wanted like talk, talk, talk. She was a talker in there too, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so rude. I
No,
apologize.
please. It is totally fine. I totally get it. Not a problem at all.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for understanding. I just was like, if I miss it and I don't get the information, then we're gonna like be waiting. We could be like, okay, now we're playing phone tag for another 2 days. And
Right. Yeah,
yes,
no, it's not
well,
a
thank
problem.
you. Yep.
I
So
get
we
it.
will
I
go. So
understand.
you were talking about
Supplements,
your
yes.
her supplements, like they were giving you were going through fertility, they were giving you supplements.
Okay, yes. So the naturopathic doctor gave me supplements. He gave me some essential fatty acids. And between those things, I was pregnant 6 weeks later.
Wow.
And, after trying for a year, after doctors telling me I had to go through fertility treatments, and I was like, what? What is happening? And so that is really what led me on just kind of my personal passion for reading about health and nutrition. And one thing, led to the other. And the final catalyst for me to go back to get my education was that my best friend in her 30s got triple negative breast cancer, which is a pretty aggressive breast cancer. And, you know, as I'm reading about all these nutrition things over the years, I'm trying to, boss my friends and family around, like, stop eating sugar, do this, do that. Nobody would listen to me. I'm like,
Yes.
I need them to listen to me. And so that was really finally, I'm like, all right, maybe if I go back to school and get some education, then they will listen to me. And so I did that. And it wasn't long after that I really felt the Lord calling me to call myself the Christian nutritionist. And that's how I've been practicing as the Christian nutritionist for the last 12 years, which is also something that I never thought I would be doing. But I'll stop there and let
Yes.
you jump in with any questions.
Yeah. Well, I know. And, you did bring up one thing, even in your history, that I think is just so true for so many people. And actually, my daughter just said it to me about she was having, I work with a lot of women with migraines, and she started having migraines. That's one of the reasons where my passions came from. And, I had that as a teenager, actually, at her age too. And she was saying almost like, she actually just said this to me. She said, I almost wish that something was wrong because then that would explain it. But just you're fine. And then I said to her, I said, well, you need to do the things that I'm telling you to do, and those are the things that change people's lives. And she has started, but in that after that conversation. But I think exactly what you're saying. Like even with your skin, you're just having to live with this. And what we realize is that we don't. And it's just one of those things that I think people are living with so many things that they don't need to live with because they don't even know they don't have to.
Well, exactly. So, of course, in that part of that journey and cleaning up my diet and changing some lifestyle habits, not only, was I able to conceive, but my genetic skin condition, went away after 20 years. I mean, I manage it through diet and lifestyle choices. My digestive issues got better. So everything got better. And I was just, it made me think back, did one doctor ever ask me what I ate, what my diet
Hmm.
was, how much I slept or anything? Do we talk about gut health? Nothing. And so even though I had never planned to practice as a practitioner, you know, once I learned more details about everything that goes into it, I was like, I can't not do that. If I could help one other person avoid what I did, then it would be worth it.
Yes, yeah. So I think that one of the things that you were saying to me before we got on is that you found one of the ways that brought you to this place that you're in right now is that you found it went for you beyond nutrition. So you're here, you're a nutritionist, you did the education, you're working with people or working with, your own conditions, and you found like there was more to it than you're seeing when you're doing some of the nutrition work.
Yeah, exactly. So started as, really focusing on nutrition and focusing on what I always just call real food the way God made it. That's the lens that I look through. I feel like the creator of our body made the perfect food for our body. And there's so much conflicting advice out there. And for me, it's very
Mhm.
simple. Genesis 1:29 says eat plants, Genesis 9:3 says eat meat. So I think when we have a nice combination of those foods, the cleanest versions, that is really the optimal diet. But beyond that, I felt like God just calling me just to kind of look a little deeper and really, looking in the context of our bodies and what I like to call in relation to creation. We were created alongside the sun, water, the earth, plant foods, animal foods. There's all of these, all of these other inputs that went into creation, um, that we are meant to live in a synergistic type relationship with, to be healthy. And so, I really started looking into this and studying more about circadian rhythm, right? Really studying about earthing, studying about how our bodies are electrical, how we need electrons, where can we get those? So all of these things I started learning and realizing that it's not just about what we eat. We also think about movement, right? But it's just not even about just exercise either. And so when I'm working with somebody, I even put a lot of these other things before we even talk about nutrition, because when we look at what I call the Genesis prescription, when we look at the creation story, there's an order to it. There is sun, water, earth, and then we get to the food. You can't have food without any of those things. And so all of those inputs are extremely important to our body. And that's what is being overlooked. And when it comes to what we're eating, our metabolism, what people don't understand is that, one of the major reasons that we eat food is to get energy. But we are meant to get 2/3 of our energy from interaction with the sun and the earth, and only about a third of it from food. But when we don't do those other things, we're solely reliant on food, which what does that do? Increases our cravings, increases our drive to eat. So there's just this extremely huge component piece of the puzzle missing that people don't realize and aren't talking about.
Yes, and I love that you said that because we're so disconnected from nature. You know what basically, what you're saying is that all of these things exist, we coexisted, we grew with them, and now we're so disconnected and we're not thinking about it in relation to that a lot of times.
That's exactly right. I mean, historically, people spent a lot of time outdoors, a lot of time connected to nature, getting sunshine, being more connected to the earth, whether, their hands are in the earth or their feet, in some way, they're grounding, they're connected to the earth. We're just getting a lot of other inputs today that we don't. Now we're inside all the time, we're on computers. And so, yeah, that disconnection goes to a very deep metabolic level that's really interfering, and people don't realize it. And I think to me, it's just fascinating to study, and just trying to educate people more on those things that, yes, food is incredibly important, but there is a bigger picture that we need to be looking at.
And not talking about quite as much as we are talking about food a lot of times because everyone has an opinion on on the diet. But you know what? But another thing I'm just thinking when you're saying that is there's a lot of different opinions, like you mentioned on diet, but we all agree that we need to do the grounding work. We need sleep. We need a good circadian rhythm. We need hydration. So I mean, I think those are universal things that everybody actually agrees that are all good for your body, and maybe we're not focusing enough of our time there.
Yeah, exactly. But, and it's because it can be challenging. I mean, we all have work that we have to do that mostly requires us to be
Yes.
indoors
Hmm.
behind computers. And so it takes an effort. But there
Hmm.
are some really just, specific things that you can do, just kind of easy ways to start that I like to share with people.
Yeah.
And, one of those, when we're talking about getting some sun exposure, one of the best things you can do, especially if you're dealing with cortisol dysregulation, adrenal fatigue, is to get that morning sunlight. The first thing in the morning, get 3 minutes of that sunrise sunlight. That is when blue light enters the atmosphere. And as that blue light enters the atmosphere, that is triggering a hormonal cascade in your brain. It's waking up a bunch of hormones. It is telling your body to make cortisol and to stop making melatonin, and that melatonin should be made in about 12 hours. There's all this messaging going on just by stepping outside. You don't have to look even directly at the light. Just being outside, the atmosphere, the light is changing. We're not seeing it, but our brain does. Our brain
Hmm.
does. Our skin does. It picks up these clues. Like you said, being circadian rhythm. How does our body know, what time of the day it is? It doesn't read a clock. It reads the
Yes.
sun, right?
Hmm.
And so if we don't get out there and give our body those time signals, then the body is not going to work optimally. It's not going to be doing the right things at the right time. Every system on our body has its preferred work schedule, as I like
Yes.
to say. And just like when we have to work beyond our work schedule, we get kind of cranky, right? We
Yeah.
don't like that. We want to work in our hours and
Hmm.
then we want to stop. And if
Yes.
somebody asks us to work overtime or on the weekends, we're like, I don't want to do that. And we're maybe not as productive or energetic about it. It's the same thing with our body. Our body has a preferred work schedule. It has signals that we're supposed to get. And when we don't get those, things start breaking down.
And there's even studies showing that you can have the cortisol dysregulation from even staying up to, from staying up too late too. So it's really, and I think we are surrounded by so much blue light. A lot of people use TV, use their phones to wind down. So what you're saying, we want that in the morning. We want to see that rise in cortisol, but we don't want that as we're going to bed. And so some of these habits that we've created also can interfere with that cortisol at night.
Absolutely. Blue light is only naturally available in nature during the daylight hours. There's no blue light, in the evening at all. And so when we're inside and we are looking at our phones, we're looking at our computers, we're looking at TV, blue light is a signal to make cortisol. And so what we're telling our body is it's time to make cortisol. And the light that is emitted from our phones and screens and such, it gives the signal. It's about the signal strength of noon. And so it's like, oh, your body thinks it's noon. It's time to crank out cortisol. And cortisol blocks melatonin. And so when you're cranking out cortisol, you're dysregulating a whole bunch of things like blood sugar for one, right? So that creates blood sugar dysregulation, which is going to create a whole host of metabolic problems. And so people just don't realize. I mean, how would you know unless somebody told you? Or we don't really know these things. So that's why I feel so passionate about making these connections for people, and having them understand that we have to mitigate that blue light in the evening. Or we're really sending mixed signals to the body.
Absolutely. So, what are other components of your Genesis prescription?
Sure. So sunlight's a huge one. Getting that morning, 3 minutes at least of the sunrise if you can. I know it can be early, but if you get out there, it's wonderful. Grounding is a really important one. So that is just having your bare feet in or hands or any bare part of your body, in the grass, in the sand, in the dirt. And what that really does is we're picking up electrons. And so a lot of people don't realize that we are electrical beings. On one level, we know that because we know we can go to the doctor and get an EKG or EEG, and that reads our brain and our heart, right? But as an electrical being, we are supposed to be in what's called a net negative charge. We're supposed to have more electrons than protons in our body to make everything work, which sounds counterintuitive. We want to be more
Hmm.
negative than positive.
Yeah.
But that's what it boils down to. We want to have more
Mhm.
electrons. One of the best ways that we get electrons is through grounding. The earth is a reservoir of electrons, it's replenished through lightning. And all we have to do is go out there and just literally touch the bare earth, do our gardening, whatever it is. And there is electron flow. Our bodies are conductive. There's electron flow into our body. We can't see it, but it's happening. And that's one of the best ways to fight inflammation, fight off illness and disease. The more electrons we have, the healthier that we're going to be. And, through the lens that I look at, with God as our creator, I, you know, he made things, if he made our body to be electrical beings, if he made our body to need electrons, he's going to make it easily accessible, to
Mhm.
get. And so some people really have a hard time believing I just have to go outside and put my feet in the grass. That sounds really cuckoo. And I'm like, yes, it does, but it works,
Yes, yeah.
And so, of course, if God calls our bodies to need electrons, he's going to give us an easy way to get them. And it is that easy. And so that is truly one of the best things you can do. You also get some electrons through UV light as well. And so those are both ways that when we're out in nature, where our body is being fortified with those electrons. And frankly, that's exactly what we're trying to get out of our food for energy, out of our carbs and fats. We're looking for electrons. And that's what is used in metabolism to make energy. But we can also get electrons from the sun and the earth. And that's what I'm saying is that people are so focused on food and metabolism, they're missing this huge source of what we're looking for out of the whole process, which is electrons, which we can get from the sun and the earth. And so when you do that, you really help balance out that need, to not be so reliant on food, and help balance out the way that your body utilizes food. And so again, it's just that bigger picture that people are missing. But that's why I love to talk about it.
Yes, yeah. No, I agree. And I actually have done a barefoot hike before. And it's amazing when you do that, that your perspective on everything changes. So I did it on a same hiking trail that I would do on a regular basis. And it was such a different experience doing it without shoes. It
I
was just
bet.
like it was. And it's something I'm like, wow, this is the same thing, but totally different without shoes because you're just feeling the earth, you're seeing things in a different way, you're thinking about what you're walking on. Like it just did. And so it's a neat thing to try to just go out and say like, okay, maybe I'm going to do a bear, watch depending on where you're hiking, but
Right.
trying it without shoes and seeing what kind of experience you have in that situation.
Yeah, that's very cool. That is such an awesome thing to do for your body. I mean, truly, like to spend that time and be that connected to the earth for that long through a hike. That is awesome.
Yeah, it was something that I wanted to try and I don't do it very often, but I have tried it and I was like I had heard it on a podcast years ago and I was like, you know what, that's something, you just feel that grounding and it was just the way to do some forest bathing and some things like
Yeah.
that. And so I would yeah, it was a good experience. It's something you can as the weather's getting warmer and nice out there, you could go out and try something like that and just see what your experience is. So I know you also talk about water too.
Right. So we all are aware of the water that we drink. Obviously, hydration is very important. We need the right minerals. And what we're looking for in our minerals, too, is an electrical charge to make our body be able to use that well. But another thing people don't really talk about is the water that we make. That is the water that is made during the metabolic process that becomes this charged water in our body. It's different. It's a different molecular structure than the water that we drink, and it becomes a very important source of energy in our body. So, kind of going back to that metabolic process and using electrons to make energy, most people are focused on the way that we make ATP. That is
Mhm.
kind of generally looked at as the energy source of our body. Um, but now science has really looked at this water that we make during the metabolic process that changes molecular form inside of our body. It's what becomes our intracellular water. And it is really fortified and charged and energized by electrons. It becomes a storehouse of electrons. So we have this water that we are made to make, and then it is supposed to be a storehouse of electrons from our body. And so that works like a big battery inside of our body. So again, kind of going back to that idea of it's not just about the food we're eating, getting electrons, and it's turning into APP. It's like, how are we really supporting this water battery that our body makes, that we're supposed to make this water that we make, and also that we are supposed to keep charged up with electrons so that it can really uh, be a source of energy for all of the functions that we have going on in our body. So I think
Mhm.
that's another one too, that's really been fascinating for me to study and to look at. And so then you have your kind of your top three things there, right? When we're talking about the Genesis prescription, which is the framework I like to teach it as, we have sun and water and earth. And again, those
Mhm.
all three things that are come before food. And so when we're not optimizing those things with our body and aligning that the way that we are supposed to work in that synergistic relationship to them, then our health is not going to be as optimized as it can be.
Yes, that is really great. And so what would you do? What do you think about electrolytes?
Oh, I think electrolytes are really important.
Hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've got to have the sodium, the potassium, right? So that's kind of one aspect of it is the water that we drink and the way that it's kind of our cells are able to utilize or not utilize that. We need electrolytes for that, absolutely, but also how that it does provide charge for the cell membrane to be able to help keep our intracellular water that we make that charged up as well. So yes, electrolytes, big fan, use them regularly. Um, Absolutely. I would say
Hmm.
that's a great thing to have a habit of doing is drinking electrolytes.
Yes, because I see people sometimes, it can play two parts. One, it helps us get the water intracellularly because sometimes people have trouble actually absorbing the water they're drinking,
Right.
and sometimes it can be easier to drink for some people that aren't big water drinkers, just so that there is some flavor in there too. So you have to be careful just what electrolytes you're drinking because not all electrolytes, like everything else, are created equal.
That is true. One interesting thing, kind of going back to what is called this structured water, this water that we make, it is also found to be a really important part of the way that we stay hydrated. And so it would also say for some people that may not feel like they're being hydrated and they're drinking water and maybe even drinking electrolyte water, that is kind of another piece to it, is that we need to have that good structured water that we're making inside of us, and keeping it charged up with electrons to be fully hydrated. And we can get that structured water when we eat plant foods. So inside of plant foods is the same kind of water that we make in the metabolic process that is also found in plant foods, which is why it's such a why that one of the reasons that the good plant foods play an important role is they have this different molecularly structured water. It's different than the water that we drink. Again, it is this structured water that when we eat those plant foods, get that structured water, it helps our body, our cells utilize it more efficiently.
Hmm. Yes, that's wonderful. Do you have any other aspects that you'd like to share with us on your Genesis prescription?
Well, just, kind of hitting the other points, we went through sun and water and earthing and plant food and animal food. Breath is the next one. So we know that God breathed life into us through our nose, not our mouth. So nose breathing, super important. I'm sure you've covered that here before. So breathing through the nose, really important, just kind of those calm breaths. Sleep also, right? So God rested on the seventh day. Sleep's very important. Movement would come next in kind of the order of the Genesis prescription as we teach it. And then in fellowship, man was not meant to be alone. So the relationships that we have, the people we surround ourselves with, we're supposed to be in relationship with each other and love each other. And so those are kind of all the tenets that I think, fully address how we're meant to be healthy.
Hmm. Yes, and relationship has changed so much because of all the technology. So
Yeah.
it really evaluating, it'll be interesting to see health change as relationship changes because now the relationship is so technological that we're not talking to people as much. It'll be interesting to see that.
Yeah, that's true. And like after COVID, we
Hmm.
became so disconnected from each other, and being in person and personal touch and hugs and just being around each other, all of those things, you're exactly right. That has changed. And I think it's changed just for the worse. And so
Hmm.
being mindful of, getting together with your people, with your friends, and, being with your family, such a huge part of the way that we stay healthy.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. You've given us such helpful information. Can you tell everyone where they can find you?
Yes, at thechristiannutritionist.com. That's my website. I'm at the Christian Nutritionist on Facebook, on Instagram. That's kind of where I am everywhere. I have a podcast called the Christian Health Club podcast, and Meg was just on it. So go listen to her. We had a great discussion about headaches and migraines. So yeah, you can find me all those places.
Well, great. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. Really enjoyed it.
Have a great day, everyone.